Okay, my name is Sarah Untersea. I am the School Family and Community Engagement Consultant that is here at Region 10 Education Service Center. And I am so happy to welcome you to this month's free family webinar. Our topic this month is a guide to the ARD process in Texas, or ARD Meetings 101. We are so happy to be partnering with Partners Resource Network today, and we have Jim Wright here to present for us on this very important topic. As we go through today's presentation, I will be dropping some links into the chat. I'm going to start by giving the link to both SpedTex and PRN so that you have those links available, as those are two excellent resources for families in Texas about all things special education. One quick thing I want to mention about SpedTex is that we have a great new feature with our My SpedTex accounts, where families can, when they create those accounts, it used to be that they could only put in one child. You are now able to put in more than one child. And so that's a great addition. You're able to keep track of things like ARD dates and FIE dates. And if you would like, it will send you reminders automatically when those dates are coming due. And I know as a parent that is super helpful. Just one more reminder to stay on top of when those things are coming up so that I can be prepared. And I'm sure that other parents feel the same way. So again, we'll put links to some of those things in the chat as we're talking. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jim to get started with our presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Jim Wright. I'm with Partners Resource Network. I'm the coordinator for this area in Region 10. Partners Resource Network serves as Texas's PTI, Parent Training Information Center. We are the PAC project. Texas is so large, we have 3 other projects across the state. So we cover Region 7, 8, 10, and 11. And one thing that's interesting about Partners Resource Network and the law is that we have to have a high percentage of our staff be parents of children with disabilities. And so I am also a parent with a child who's now 20 years old. I say child, man-child. He has Down syndrome. He's legally blind. He's in the 18 plus transition program. We're up here in the Frisco ISD area. And I has a younger brother who is also a bigger man-child. He's 17, he's a senior. He was also served under dyslexia and speech as he grew up. And I bring that up to say that our children has been a success story of the special education process. And it was a lot to learn. There's a lot to go along the journey for, both sides, because, my older one definitely had some challenges. But it's just remarkable of how much they've grown and how much they've thrived with the support that special education can provide. So we're going to get into the guide to the ARD process today. And, when it all starts out, how do we get help for your school-age children? You got to talk to your child's teacher, the school principal, make sure that your child is receiving all the services that are available to them. Support services may include, but are not limited to tutoring, remedial services, compensatory services, response to scientific research-based intervention, other academic and behavioral supports, and any type of intensive support if your child is struggling on the STAR test or any other end of course test. And so there are provisions in the laws to help support the children that are at risk at this. So here's the biggie we call the Notice of Procedural Safeguards. It has to be provided at least once a year, and upon initial request for evaluation, receipt of the first complaint from a parent in a school year, receipt of the first request for a due process hearing in a school year, a day decision is made to make a disciplinary change of placement, and or at parental request. I think Sarah's putting it into the chat how you can access a generic copy, but the one that your school's gives you does have more information filled in on who to contact when you're not sure how to interpret what's going on or that you need additional help. The interesting thing about procedural safeguards is that you'll never read it until you have to, And then when you have to, you need to read it from front to cover. And I think last month we covered quite a bit of the elements of the procedural safeguard. So, SpedTex has a lot of resources on how to understand this document, and it's a very serious document, and it's useful. And the point of how it's laid out is to get the parents and the school administration on a pathway to come into consensus.
And if you were not able to join the webinar last month when we covered that more in depth, please feel free to send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat, and I'm happy to send you the slide deck and the link to where that recording is.
Thanks, Sarah. So if we're going to, our child's struggling, what do? We want to refer for a full individual and initial evaluation. That can be initiated by the parent, school personnel, or anybody that's involved in the education or care of your student. It includes written parental consent and is conducted in all areas of suspected disability. And one thing I want to really stress out, it's best that it's done in writing. So the 13 qualifications for special education in Texas, the disability categories are auditory impairment, autism, deafblindness, emotional disturbance, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, non-category early child ages 3 to 5, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning disability, speech or language disability, traumatic brain injury, and or visual impairment, including blindness. So prior written notice is required when school proposes or refuses to initiate or change the identification, evaluation, education program, educational placement, and or the provision of free appropriate public education, otherwise we call it FAPE. So when you get into special education, you're going to find out there's a whole slew list of acronyms. And one of the handouts that we'll give to everybody after this session, we do have a sheet that has a cheat sheet of all the acronyms or many acronyms that exist. And Sarah will get that to you after this presentation is over. Now, I think that prior written notice is one of the most confusing terms in education. It confuses me tremendously, even to this day, because it says prior written notice, but it tends to happen after the fact. And so you would get this at the end of the meeting, and it tells what the written notice for ARD meetings must include the purpose, time, and location of the meeting, and must list the representatives attending the meeting. So parental consent. The school must obtain parental consent before the initial evaluation, the initial provision of services, and the parent must be informed in their native language or form of communication. So it's important to notice that you can revoke consent at any time, but once you revoke that, anything that has been developed up to that point still exists in the educational file of your child. I am a big believer if your child is struggling in having evaluations. That's one of the best tools to figure out, what are the needs of the child. And, there are standardized tests that go into this, and it's super valuable information to figure out how do we help this child to be successful. So how do we get eligibility for special education services? The students must meet both of these requirements. They must have a disability, and as a result of the disability, must need special education services to benefit from education. So not all struggling learners have a disability. If the student's problems are primarily from a lack of appropriate instruction in reading or math, due to the fact that the student has limited English proficiency, LEPE, the student is not eligible for special education services. In these situations, the campus-based support team may meet and recommend other services or programs in general education to help the student. The campus-based support team may recommend additional interventions available to non-disabled students. So, just because we have a diagnosis of ADHD, it does not automatically qualify you for services. They have to also meet what we call educational need for these services. So the ARD committee meetings, they must be held at least once a year, and they're going to review the student's IEP, that's the individual education plan, determine whether annual goals are being met, and address any lack of expected progress, the results of any reevaluations, information about the student provided to or by the parents, anticipated needs of the student, special factors, and other matters. So you may request a ARD committee meeting at any time to discuss educational concerns such as placement, IP goals, and objectives. However, I think it's best that if you have concerns, in between the ARD committee, is that you reach out to the principal, the teachers, and you have some conversation and dialogue to create communication. And then if we can come up with solutions there, we may need to formalize those in another ARD meeting, but just using the ARD meetings only to have, teacher conferences, I don't think is the best use of time, because there are so many other people that have to be involved in this process. So you want to make sure that you have those established communications, you build that relationship, and then we use the ARD committee time to finalize and to formalize any type of adjustments to the plan that may be needed. And there are times when situations change, hospitalizations, illnesses, changes in behavior. All these things could be good times to have an extra ARD meeting. But again, you do want to communicate all that prior to having your ARD committee, so we can hopefully be in a better place to meet the needs of the student. So who goes to ARD committee membership? We have our parents, at least one regular education teacher, at least one special education teacher, an individual who can interpret evaluation results. In most districts, we call that the diagnostician. It doesn't necessarily have to be the diagnostician, though. You have to have an individual who represents a district. Typically, that can be the principal, the assistant principal, or it could be a representative from the special education department at the district level, and the student when appropriate. This definitely, you want to consider the student being there when we're talking about transition plans. I encourage families to include their students as early as they possibly can. This helps develop self-advocacy skills, helps the student know that there are plans being made to help them, to support them, and to understand what these plans and supports are. So when we do our ARD meeting scheduling, the school must invite parents to each ARD committee meeting, provide written notice 5 school days before the meeting, arrange a meeting time and place agreeable to parents and the school, and conduct the meeting without the parents if they refuse to attend. Now, there's a difference between refusal and unable. So if you're unable to meet at the proposed time, I would recommend that you look at your calendar and get back with the school and say that, these 3 or 4 different times and dates you can be available to meet. And so this communication helps both parties to reach that mutually agreeable time. But you do have to respond to that in order to show that you're trying to reach a mutual agreeable time. So what are the responsibilities of the ARD committee? When developing the IEP, the ARD committee must consider the strengths of the students, the parents' concerns, results of the most recent evaluation, the academic, developmental, functional needs of the student, and the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, the PLAF. One of the key items I want to point out on this slide is we really need to focus on the strengths of the student. We need to find, what that strength is, and we need to make our strengths super strong, because the stronger that we have one skill that we can, really be master and we can be proficient at, that leads to so many more opportunities to use that strength to overcome their other needs, or to lean into that for their growth into independence or involvement in the community. So you really want to make your strength super strong. Now, if your student does qualify for under IDEA, the school is required to provide a FAPE in the least restrictive environment, LRE. This is accomplished through the ARD committee development of the IEP based on the child's PLAF and the school's implementation of the IEP. So we want to make sure that the information on the PLAF, really reflect your student where they are at this point of the meeting. So what are the ARD committee responsibilities? So when developing an IEP, the ARD committee must develop measurable annual goals designed to meet the student's needs, determine necessary accommodations for participation in the mandatory state assessments, what we call STAR testing now, identify supplementary aids and services, related services, and special education services, things such as OT, PT, adaptive PE, music therapy, and then consider supplemental areas to be addressed for the students with autism. So in the statewide assessments, if the ARD committee determines that accommodations are necessary to participate in statewide assessments, the IEP must contain a statement of appropriate accommodations. For those students who take alternative assessments based on alternative achievement standards, the IEP must contain a description of benchmarks or short-term objectives as part of the annual goals. So when developing an IEP, the ARD committee decides that the student qualifies for extended school year services, otherwise known as ESY, makes decisions regarding transition goals and services, guarantees that the student will be educated in the least restrictive environment, LRE, and decides whether the student has met graduation criteria. So ESY is not just, summer school. It's not limited to categories of disability, but it's based on the criteria for extended school year and not a one-size-fits-all decision. The criteria for ESY is a recruitment of services if in one or more critical areas addressed in the student's current IEP, the student exhibited or reasonably may be expected to exhibit severe or substantial regression that cannot be regained within a reasonable period of time. The term severe or substantial regression means that the student has been or will be unable to maintain one or more acquired critical skills in the absence of ESY services. So how do we define what a reasonable period of time? Typically, that can be either a period of 6 to 8 weeks after school starts up. If they're not able to recoup some of those goals that they had mastered from the last school year, and it takes more than that amount of time, then it may be a good idea to consider ESY services so we don't have those gaps in the each year that the student goes back to school. So discipline. The student school code of conduct applies to all students. Special rules and limitations may apply to the student with a disability if the school proposes to change the student's placement or remove the student from current placement for more than 10 collective school days during the school year. And so one thing I like to tell parents that have children under the autism spectrum or emotional difficulties is that it is a really good idea to physically read that school code of conduct from the start to the finish, because the child needs to know what is in there, what is the expectations of them, and what are the rules that they should be following, and that could be broken. Because I've had many calls of students that were encouraged by friends to exhibit behavior that doesn't follow the school code of conduct, and the student does that trying to, quote, develop a friendship, not realizing the consequences of those actions because of their disability. But if they do certain things, such as bring alcohol or tobacco to the schools, like on a dare or whatever, they are still subject to that disciplinary process, regardless of their disability. So it's super important that they understand and they have a chance to know that they are breaking the rules. Because, if they don't have that knowledge, then, who's responsible for that? That usually is the adults, but the child is the one that has to pay the consequences. So then we get into what they call the manifestation, determination, and conduct. So when addressing a discipline issue, the ARD committee meets to conduct a manifestation, determination review and determines any needed alternative education settings, IAES. And I believe we're going to have a session on this later in the school year to talk more in depth about MDRs. So they must be held within 10 school days of any change the placement of the student due to a violation of the code of conduct. In Texas, the IAES may be in-school suspension or a disciplinary alternative education program, otherwise known as DAEP. When parents have a disagreement of what's going on, these are the tools that are in their procedural safeguards. That's when we get back to that, our dispute resolution options. We have a facilitated IEP, mediation, you can file a complaint, and you can go through a due process hearing. So these are the different ways the parent can seek relief when we have a disagreement. Again, all of these processes are designed to have increased communication, to get the issues on the table, and to try to resolve the differences so we can have resolution and meet the needs of the child. So that's one thing I am impressed with, how the procedural safeguards are laid out, is if you follow the procedural safeguards, it forces both sides to go down those journeys to get to that, hopefully to get to that agreement or resolution. So what do we expect at the ARD meetings? Here's a pretty good recap. We do our introductions, our notice of procedural safeguards, a review of assessment data, determination of our eligibility, review and development of present levels of academic and functional performance, PLAF, review and development of IEP, determination of placement. We get our assurances and reading of the minutes. And then we have our closing remarks and our signatures. One thing that I get asked about signatures, if you're unsure, you can take a little bit of time to read that full document to sign it. However, in the vast majority of situations, everything is, communicated, everything is in agreement, and it's okay to go ahead and sign right then and there. So it just depends on the situation of that. So there's no hard rule that you always do it this way, you always do it that way. It's appropriate to sign at the time if you're in agreement. That is the end of our slide. So here's our website, and I think Sarah has put that in the chat. And